The best way to learn portrait. Trying to draw a good portrait is still tricky and usually requires a lot of knowledge as a basis. In this video, I will share what I've learned and how to quickly draw a black and white portrait that looks pretty good. For beginners, full-color portraits will be a little more difficult. I will prepare another video to show you that part. These are black and white portraits painted with Procreate or Photoshop, usually with 1 to 3 brushes, with more contrast and less detail. In the beginning, I also had a lot of difficulties in learning portraits and even did a lot of exercises without making any progress. So I hope this video can help beginners gain confidence when starting to paint portraits. Let's start by showing you what kind of art you can create after learning this tutorial. This portrait was painted using only black and white, with light gray as the background color. Only one brush was used, and it was this hard brush with a rough texture. I've covered how to use brushes in another tutorial video, and texture brushes can be used to express midtones as well as add information. So while this painting looks like it only has 3 tones, there are actually 5 tones that come together to make it. Black, black texture, gray, white texture, and white. Once we have mastered this method of painting, we can expand it. As in this painting, I changed the composition, facial proportions, and black and white contrast throughout. It looks much more finished by using more different shades of grays and varying the texture of the brush strokes for the expression. This painting was done earlier this year, so there is still room for detail. But in terms of the overall effect and what needs to be expressed, there's nothing wrong with it anymore. This one was recently painted in Procreate with different brushes, but the technique is similar. I uploaded the whole painting process to my YouTube channel, so check it out if you are interested. The parts I've highlighted in purple are the darks of the painting. Usually, a picture consists of dark and light parts, and an accurate and clear representation of one of these parts is enough to convey the idea in a general way. Okay, now to briefly describe the preparation of painting portraits in my method. The first step is to find a good portrait photo to use as a reference. Portraits under direct sunlight or point light sources are recommended and will be easier to paint. Portraits under cloud skies or complex light sources, while beautiful, will be more difficult for beginners to work with. It is recommended that you consider this after you have drawn a few portraits. Then there are the colors, 3 by default: black, white, and gray. I know that many artists do not recommend using pure black or white for painting, but for beginners, the fewer variables there are to manipulate, the less difficult it is and the more consistent the final rendering will be. A little bit of my understanding about the brush part. Some teachers do not recommend beginners to use textured brushes because they hide mistakes and problems and make painting more difficult. But I think using textured brushes for beginners should be a help and an improvement. And the right texture can make medias or even round work look good. If you draw a picture that looks great, you will get better and better. So don't worry that using textured brushes will hold you back in the long run. The use of the smudge tool depends on the software you are using. I usually set the shortcuts for Photoshop smudge tool to O. You can set them in your personal preference, and you can turn off shortcuts for functions you don't use. Mixer brushes are usually set to this dry heavy load option, and I check the sample all layers box to make it easy to paint on a new layer. Press Alt to select the area you want to capture and paint. Because the mixer brushes destroys black and white relationships and edges, I will use it later when I need to adjust edges and black and white relationships. The last part is checking. Since this method does not use sketches, there are not even positioning crosshairs. So a secondary check is necessary in this case, mainly to check proportions, position, and perspective. It doesn't matter if you don't know many of the basics now, as long as you know the approximate range of positions of the facial structures. Usually, with 80% similarity, the whole painting will look less problematic. Lowering your expectations in the beginning can lead to better results. Just take it easy. Here are the steps to my painting. I will go through it briefly here and expand on it later with examples. You don't have to do it this way, but it's usually more efficient. Since dark areas tend to contain more information than light areas, prioritizing them allows you to see the results as quickly as possible. This is a black and white portrait that I drew earlier with Procreate. First, I will roughly draw the dark part. It's okay if I can't draw it correctly, I will add it later. When you are almost done with the darks, start adding the lights. Because Procreate's paint and adjustment tools only work on a single layer, so when I use this application, I always paint the light and dark parts on the same layer. Then I use the smudge tool to control the edge and tones. If there are problems with structures and proportions, use the liquify tool to adjust them slightly. Once you have the general feel of the painting, add details. Finally, make adjustments and use filters to add some effects if necessary. This portrait uses a combination of more brushes, following similar steps. The darks were painted first, then the lights and highlights. I spent more time on the details because I hadn't done many portraits at the time and wasn't familiar enough with the structure of the face. I do not recommend copying the original image exactly. Even beginners can add their own ideas and designs in the middle and late stages of drawing and art, trying to control the edges as well as adjusting the composition of the whole painting with black and white contrast. At that time, I realized that this produce could probably be applied to all portraits, but at that time I was not able to summarize the whole theory well. Now I can confidently share with you this method, which may not be recognized by mainstream theorists, because it is very effective in my practice, and about every 3 to 5 drawings, there will be a qualitative leap. I prepared 2 complete portrait painting processes as examples using Procreate and Photoshop. If this is your first portrait, it's a good idea to choose an image with a single light source and no other shadows or projections. All 3 images are beautiful, but the first has shadows of other objects on the face, and the second has projections of leaves and has adjusted colors and darks that could be used as a reference for a full-color portrait. I will choose the third as a reference. Even though it is cloudy, it has extreme light and dark areas for painting. I've labeled the dark and light areas for you. Okay, all three of these images are beautiful. I like the atmosphere of the first one and the wrinkles on the lady's face. But this image is too difficult for a beginner to use as a tutorial example. The second image itself is up to snuff, but unfortunately it also has the flower and the dress fabric, which can be difficult for beginners who are not familiar with generalization and composition. The third, on the other hand, is an excellent reference, with a clear separation of light and dark, and plenty of the light and dark areas to manipulate as needed. It's not over when you are done painting. You still have to do regular reviews. These are paintings I've done in the past, and many of them don't look like they have problems at the moment. Or they feel like they have problems at the moment but don't know exactly what they are. Over time, problems are often easy to identify in retrospect. These are many aspects that can usually be focused on: perspective, composition, proportion, and even details. A final word on long-term planning for learning portrait painting. Personally, I have tried many styles and many ways of practicing. I think the most effective way is to draw as many types of portraits as possible, with different ages, genders, and features. First, learn to draw the big shapes, then light and shadow, then control the edges, and finally practice the facial features. Thank you for choosing me as your introduction to learning portraits. I hope this video was helpful and I will see you in the next video.